comment on any items. I'll ask our city administrator if you've got anything in the way of preliminaries before we go to public comment. Chris.
Mayor and council, I would just ask that the utility bill cycle that we're on includes all the information that we went over several times with the council as far as being able to trust but verify. I was able to verify every calculation on there relative to my own utility bill. I would encourage you to all do the same, because Debbie and I will be back in front of this body formally in September to ask that now that that information is there, we need to get late fees and turnoffs back implemented sometime this fall. We've talked about, ultimately that's your decision when, but we just need to get that notification out there and give people several months to prepare for that transition. So that's it.
Very good. Thank you for that. Our first item up is public comment, and tonight this is on any item. For anybody who's not familiar with the process, work sessions are a little more informal, just discussion time. The city council doesn't make formal binding decisions at work sessions, except perhaps to give direction to staff. So with that, though, we'll open it up for public comment on any item on our agenda or not. We will have an opportunity on those agenda items for another opportunity for public comment when we get into those items. So if you're interested in those, you might hold your comments until we get to that, unless you need to leave, in which case you can make those now. So with that, former city council member Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I came this evening. We have so many wonderful things in this city to celebrate, so many wonderful things about this city that encourage people to come here, to live here. But there is an issue that I spoke of previously, and I will again speak to the fact that there are so many people in this city who are without housing. And I happened to meet a young person, 19 years old, who hangs out at gas stations. Because at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you aren't hiding in the shadows, where do you go where it's safe enough for you to be? A gas station. It's 24 hours. They have the lights on. You can go in and feel relatively safe inside a gas station. How do we address these issues? A 19-year-old who has experienced trauma, who has experienced very difficult schooling that hasn't been successful at them being able to find a career or to really find a start in what should be the rest of their lives. How do we address this? Constituents of Ward 3, $800 for one bedroom. The total rent for a 3-bedroom is $2,400, and a constituent is paying $800 for a bedroom. Of course, with just having a bedroom, that also means, in addition, you're paying for storage. Because where do you put all the things that you own and that you need if you have only one bedroom? That means storage on top of $800 a month. The owner doesn't care. The owner lives in Washington. And this is an opportunity for them to take advantage of the fact that there isn't enough housing in this city to house everyone. I learned of an important fact from the League while they were making a presentation to legislators, and Director Friday was in attendance and other city staff. If the city of San Francisco relied on increasing its housing stock to have enough housing for people to get to affordability, they will have to wait 80 years. That's not what happens. If you want affordable housing, you build affordable housing. It will not work to wait. So I know that this is not just a city issue, and I encourage you to reach out to me. And I hope that maybe council members who have an interest in that could also speak to the League. The League has many ideas, and also these are evidence-based. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Waters.
Good evening to our city council. I am District 3 Yellowstone County Commissioner Mike Waters. It's good to see all of you, many friends and as a resident of Billings, it's good to be here in front of you. I come to talk to you about, many of you have heard that the state of Montana is looking at Billings and Yellowstone County as a possible site for some sort of mental health facility. While details have not been forthcoming, we have real concerns about what that would mean for our community and for the county, for the city, possibly for the city of Billings. As all of you know, our public safety budgets are strained. We have a mental health population that is straining the resources for the mental health capabilities we have here in Yellowstone County, many of which through our mental health levy that Yellowstone County is partnered with organizations here in the Billings community and across the county. We struggle to find workforce for these organizations now. It's expensive, and any kind of mental health facility that may bring more of that population to Yellowstone County, that would possibly release them onto our streets. They would make our way into an overcrowded jail right now, straining already strained public resources for mental health. We have real concerns that the state would just build this facility. Then when they propose to release somebody, they would release them into our community and expect our resources to pick up the tab and Yellowstone County taxpayers to do that. Not to mention the possible safety implications of bringing seriously mentally ill folks and adding them to an already public safety problems that may or may not be. My fellow commissioners have voiced their concerns. I want to partner with you to let you know that I have very serious concerns about this ending up here in Billings and Yellowstone County. I would just ask you as our city council to talk to the state of Montana and our legislators, join us in making sure that this either is placed in a better community or a better area of Montana that could better serve them, or ensure that we would be able to handle whatever it is that they are proposing to do. I thank you for your time.
Very good, thank you. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda or on the agenda if you've got to leave? Any other public comment before we close the public comment period? Seeing no one come to the podium, we'll close the public comment period, move on with our agenda. First item up is possible revisions to our sidewalk impediments ordinance that now deals with snow removal. So Wyeth, are you going to kick that off and turn over to Tina, or whatever? We'll leave it with you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just kick it off very briefly. Tina's going to go through the presentation on the information that you have before you. There's actually two things being considered for the discussion tonight. One is on, as you, Mayor, noted, the section that addresses snow removal and removal of obstacles and obstructions on the sidewalk. The other one is very basic, of just trying to make sure our codes are aligned with some state language and the state code. So we've got those two things to share with you, and then with the plan to bring those back soon for action. Before I hand it off to Tina, I just also wanted to introduce Laura Watson, who's a deputy city attorney, has been with us for a little while now, and she is now working, helping with code enforcement support in one of her roles. That's not all she's doing, but for us, it's really been really good. She's been great to work with, and she's gotten up to speed and really helped us both with things like this when we're working on, looking at ordinance issues, but also preparation for court and things like that when we have to go to municipal court. So she may chime in here as helping us go through this. Thanks.
Okay, Mayor, Council, thank you very much for your time tonight. I'm going to go through the presentation, and then we can address questions after that or comments. Is that okay with you, Mayor?
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you. So the first one we're going to deal with is the removal of snow, ice from sidewalks by abutting property owners. This is code 22406. I wanted to change the title because really it encompasses more than just snow and ice. A more appropriate term would be impediments, and anything that occurs there naturally or We have other ordinances that deal with things that are placed there on purpose. We recently had a situation, which is part of the reason I brought this to you, is that there was a tremendous amount of gravel and dirt that ended up on some sidewalks along, I think it was Main Street. And when we sent out the letters, the property owners didn't really understand why they were getting a snow removal letter. So I thought just changing the title would clear that up and make it more generic so that folks would realize that, okay, I need to read deeper into this notice. So that was the reason for the title change. In section A, we removed the word foot travel because really we have more than just pedestrians that use our sidewalks. So we left it as travelers. And then in the last sentence, we added that the removal or repair of the impediment should be no less than 36 inches to accommodate our wheeled travelers. I based that measurement on research on how wide motorized assistance vehicles can be, and it ranged anywhere from 24 to 36 inches. So I thought 36 would be a fair width. The mayor did bring up a question to Gina earlier about clarification on that sentence. And I thought that maybe if we just added the word width to that statement, that it would be clear that you have to clear it at least 36 inches. Because what we're finding when we head into snow season is folks will just take a shovel and clear a little bit of a path. And that doesn't help our folks that are in wheeled assistance. It doesn't help parents that are perhaps walking their kids to school and they have a stroller or, something like that. So I wanted to accommodate those folks with this revision. In subsection B, I just kind of cleaned up the language to match. So wherever it said ice, mud, slush, or other impediments, I just incorporated that within the narrative in that paragraph so it all matched. And then we cleaned up the language in the first sentence, removing upon sidewalks from fronting property owned by persons not residing in the city. And we just referred back to section A so that everything read consistently. And then in this section, I'm not aware, and I did check with others on this, if we've ever done the assessment portion, and not to my knowledge, we haven't, but the generic or the general opinion was to leave it in there just as an option, but change the word shall to may. So it basically gives the city the option to do that as opposed to the directive. And there is no resolution on file currently. I checked with Denise on that. Subsection C, we removed the language for any person because I felt that that was kind of redundant. It's just unlawful to dispose of it. Doesn't matter if it's a person or a company or whatever. So I felt that extra language was not needed. And then we, of course, added the specified ice, mud, slush, and other impediments in there to match the language. I'm very much trying to keep any of the amendments consistent. And then subsection D is actually new language. We run into problems where public roads are plowed onto city sidewalks, and then those property owners are required to clear those sidewalks. I feel like if it's a natural occurrence where it snows, those property owners should remove the snow or the impediment. I feel that if it's placed there by an entity, because clearly they're trying to clear a roadway, I understand that. But if it should not be up to the property owner at that point. It should be that entity that moves that snow that clears that area. So that I just put that in there because we do face that problem sometimes along Main Street and also along North 27th. That is everything for that section. And then the other code that we were looking at was the adoption of state regulation for sanitation rules. And basically, this is just a language change. It takes out some of the information as far as leaving a physical copy on file, which is really kind of outdated. Everything is online or digital now. And it has the title, chapter, and section have changed on the state level in the ARM. So we just wanted that to match our code. So it's really just a language cleanup. It means the same thing. We are adopting the state regulation. We are accepting it as a city, but it just matches now. So if you were to go into 15501 right now and click on Title 16, Chapter 10, Subchapter 7, it would not take you where you want to go. But with the language change, it will. And that's my presentation.
Very good. We'll just start here, Councilmember Tisdale, and we'll go clockwise.
We do not. Okay.
You want to comment on snow buddies?
Yeah, there was a program when I first started with code enforcement that I don't think it was really up and running very strongly, but it's called Snow Buddies. And we tried to make that work. But the problem that you run into is one, people aren't necessarily volunteering. It would be something that we would have to manage, which would mean staff time. And also, there's the liability issue too. So I was concerned about having something city-driven that perhaps somebody gets hurt. You know, do we have to look at insurances? That sorts of thing. I'm not totally ruling out a Snow Buddies program, but I think I would like to rework it to where it's effective and maybe run by, I don't know, students or schools or something like that where they can volunteer in their neighborhoods and do it under that umbrella. But I just haven't had the time to really put that together. You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Rogers.
You're in section B. Okay. Go back to that one. Correct. That would be, it could be on private property, but not on city property. It does.
Or specify of the owner of the alley or sidewalk or private property, since the city is the owner of the alley or the
Absolutely. We can definitely make that change. Yep. That was one of my recommendations towards the end of the day when I got some feedback today. So I can certainly put that word in there. Thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Am I on? BMCC, the section D. If you go to when a non-city entity moves impediments from a roadway onto alleys, sidewalks, they should be responsible for removing it from the alley sidewalks unless there is permission from the city. I think it should read when a non-city entity or a city entity, then they should come back and clean it off. Because I'm getting really tired of doing my walks and then having the city come down Park Hill Drive and put the snow back on the sidewalks, especially slush and all of that. The city should not be immune to whatever we're going to try to find someone else. So that needs to be changed.
Okay,
Thank you.
duly noted. That's D.
Councilor Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Item D, which of all the snow complaints, this is the one I get the most of. I just shoveled my walk and then somebody came by and dumped all this stuff on my sidewalk and now it's frozen and there's no way I'm going to get it out. Is there any penalty or clause or what's the enforcement part of this that says the non-entity has to come back and fix it, whether it be tomorrow or 6 months from now, but there's no language in here that says what happens.
Further down in the article is the enforcement section. It's not in the 400 or the 406, but it is a municipal infraction. I believe it's further down in Article 22.
But is that realistic though? If they plow half the city sidewalks, I mean, is it realistic to have someone come back and remove all that?
Are you,
Being honest.
well, we have to start somewhere, right? I would think that, I guess I don't really understand your question. Is it realistic to enforce?
Well, I mean, I went to one subdivision last year, a year before. The entire subdivision for blocks and blocks and blocks were covered. Well, it may cost more money to go back and remove that than it did to plow it to start with. So, I mean, realistically, how easy is it to go tell the people you got to go move that back? Or is it making the people feel better that there's a penalty?
You have a valid point. I guess I was looking for a solution for those areas where we rarely do that. I think this was the first snow season where I lived that we actually plowed residential neighborhoods. And when I got home after they plowed through my neighborhood, I had a snow wall at the foot of my driveway. So I had to remove that, which I was grateful that the streets were cleared because now I could safely get out of my subdivision because it's not a well-traveled one. You only go there if you live there. So the snow was not packed down, but I guess I was looking for those longer stretches of roads where we do have significant foot traffic, whereas in a residential neighborhood, maybe it's less.
That I talked with said, don't plow if that's what happened. Just FYI.
Right, and I'm not going to be able to make everybody happy with that. I think Wyeth has a comment. I can see out of the
No, I mean, just to add, I guess, I mean, I think there's a couple things going on, I would say. So we have the efforts to make sure that the sidewalks are cleared, snow, dirt, gravel, whatever. And then we have the ways that, the city and MDT plow snow also, which continue to be a work in progress, I would say. I mean, the city's already plowing to the center is a huge improvement. MDT, we're still trying to get them to do that. That still hasn't happened. And so we do have those challenges like Tina pointed out on some of the major roads. But I think that's a situation like, that we continue to work through on the snow clearing side versus dealing with some of these situations. So, I mean, yeah, if there's a whole subdivision where every sidewalk was plowed over, yeah, I mean, we'll have to figure out how to handle that. That's not the normal kind of situation that we run into, and how we might enforce that versus normally, like, yeah, we're dealing with several properties or a series of properties where that happens, and then it's kind of manageable. But I think we'll have to look at both back to, continue on how snow is removed in general versus also these violations. It's just all I would add.
Yeah, Councilor Gill, can you use the microphone?
Sorry to jump in, but it seems like this this ordinance language would be, let's write it in such a way that no one wants to have to go back and redo it all. So let's do it right in the first place. And again, a work in progress, but it seems like there is an intent there's a good reason to put it in here. That's our intent. That's the standard we're trying to plow to. So
Feel free to come back to this very important issue. Is your comments? Were you done, Councilor Boyd? Okay, Councilor Nice?
Thank you. Yeah, because it was on, but, all right. So, and maybe you can take some of this is a start, is take some of these things and then utilizing your definition up front of impediments, and then you just describe the snow and ice. But then when it comes time to start merging some of these other codes, ordinances into this one, we can take the garbage ones or the foliage ones, or the parking your car and your drive off the, public sidewalks ones, and bring that into that as obstructions, and, put that definition of obstructions of sidewalks. So you start with the impediments, is what you're talking about here, add obstructions, and then start bringing these in. So I think that's the whole idea, is this is a good start. But I think we need to make sure we set it up well to, for the rest of the impediments and obstructions that we face on the sidewalks. And in the residential area, people ride their bikes on the sidewalks. That's where, they don't have to ride on the road, they ride on the sidewalks. And it makes it difficult, especially with your kids, to then go on the street because you got a car parked there or the bushes growing out, and then you got to go off the curb and try to get back on, and it's just not conducive to family friendly. So that's my comments. I think the other things we talked about was who's responsible. And so I think the idea of repairing sidewalks, it's not the occupant, a tenant of it, it's actually the landowner. So I think there'll be some changes that you're going to make on that. And then I did have a question to you that you said you would explain about these private communities have private roads, private sidewalks and stuff, but they're for public use. So how is that going to be addressed by this ordinance?
Right. I'm going to let Wyeth talk to you about that one. He's gave me some feedback on that. I did want to point out that I agree with you about the occupant versus owner. So I will tweak that language for you, which is the whole purpose behind this work session, is so that I can get everyone's feedback. Additionally, I understand where you're coming from with having one code that covers it all. That would be fantastic. We do have codes that cover vehicles parked over sidewalks. It's in our parking code. So I hear what you're saying, and I do also agree with you that it would be simpler to have a definition for impediment and then just use that term, because it would certainly clean up the language in here as well. So I agree with that, because I like things to be more concise. Towards the end of the day, Todd Korn still kind of works with me on code enforcement stuff, so I have him in the loop also. And he gave us some starting points for an impediment definition that I can certainly share with you as follow-up after the meeting.
Okay.
But he does a really good job in detailing exactly what you're talking about. And so if we place that as one of the portions or subsections of the code and just had that definition in there, and then we could move on from there and just use the word impediment. And that would actually help me clean this up a little bit more. So I agree with the points that you brought to me. They were all very valid. And I appreciate the time that you took to look through it.
Great. And Wyeth is going to explain the private.
Sure. Yeah, actually, and briefly, I think, and you'll, like Tina said, we can share the definition. I think one of the things we have to figure out, and we can have Laura and Todd and all weigh in terms of this, like where things are in the code. I think trying to figure out where this covers, those things where you're talking about the sidewalk, but we also have, if there is something about like the parking, like Tina mentioned, where you were talking about vehicles blocking the sidewalk, I think trying to figure out, there's also places in the code where people need to go to look for, how do I do parking? So we have to figure out how best to get it so that depending on what I'm trying to figure out, I go to the right spot. So we encompass as much as we can in this section, but we may still have those other sections, and legal may have some thoughts even on reference and stuff too that could help with that. So
I think like the state does often, you see them refer from, as do as in XYZ code, and you have to refer back to that. And so you could easily do that where you cross-reference them and maybe not have the full thing in this code, or maybe not in the other code, but this is where you have the one code where you actually address when you make all the changes. And then the other codes are just referring back to this one, so everyone knows if it's an impediment, no matter what department it may be, this is where you look for your impediments.
So just that, and then yeah. Secondly, this does not differentiate in terms of private, sidewalks that are in private areas. So whether it's happening on a public sidewalk that's in the public right of way, or a sidewalk like you described that's for public access in a subdivision, in a private area, we would apply this the same way. So that wouldn't change, or isn't changed by this, and hasn't been before. If we get a complaint, we address it the same way.
Okay, great. And I appreciate the mayor bringing the thing about the width. I brought that up as well. So it's the height, because again, when you're talking about snow, you're not talking about height, but when you're riding your bike down the sidewalk and you got a tree that's clipping you, and you probably had this happen before. Okay, I do in the out of the city, I do. And so that often happens, and you have to duck, and so it is something that we need to make sure that we can use the sidewalks like they're intended. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rowan? Nothing. Councilor Rupsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Tina, I applaud the effort, right? We just got to take steps in this direction and get it cleared. I think this new section D is, it's kind of a no-win situation. If we're going to not plow, if we're going to tell everybody that we shouldn't plow onto the sidewalks, then we're going to plow into the gutters, and then people can't get to their mailboxes. It's kind of a no-win. But I think we just do the best we can and recognize that we live in a place where every few years we get a whole lot of snow, and it's going to be very challenging for some people for a couple weeks. And help your neighbors when they need help. Thanks.
Councilor Gulick?
Yeah, thank you again for also addressing this issue. And I like the ordinance language about the responsibility of entities plowing onto sidewalks to take care of that. So this is city ordinance. MDT has been one of the challenges we've had over the last, since I've been on council. I know that's been an issue, and before that as well. Have there been conversations with MDT? Are they aware that that this is likely coming? And what happens if they don't change their regime?
I'll start, and then Tina. No, so yes, first there have been conversations. In fact, they are looking at some areas where they are looking at piloting the plowing to the center. And Debbie in Public Works could probably speak to it in more detail, but we've been in those conversations with them to try to address that. And then certainly, yeah, we've also had the conversations. In fact, we had an issue with them that we talked through regarding after the snow in the spring, where there was lots of sand and gravel and we were working first with the property owners and then with them to get that dealt with. And they actually came through with a broom, a machine broom, and swept it off. So we've been trying to coordinate better on that as well. So yeah, the ongoing conversation, it's just tough for them to switch that practice, like I said, the way the city's doing it, where at least you get it out away from the curb, away from the walk, and into the middle.
Great. Councilmember Rupsis, you're done? Chris, you want to chime in?
I just want to ask Wythe, can you confirm, do we allow subdividers going forward to continue to build curb walks, or have we officially made that no longer an acceptable design standard?
Right. Yeah. No, right now, and it's been that way for a while in our subdivision regulations, you have to do boulevard sidewalk, and there's standards for that width. The only place I would say where we've seen any sidewalk that might be still curb is where if there's a piece where you're trying to match and connect and stuff like that, we've worked through that. But in any of the new developments or larger filings and stuff, yeah, they have to do the boulevard.
Thanks. So we can't fix what's been built over the past 100 years, but I would plead with you as you look at the next 50,000 people who move to town to not allow sidewalks to be attached to curbs. These issues are exacerbated like tenfold because of that design flaw. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. I guess it comes around to me. Just a few comments. I would join with what others have said about looking at the exact language in 406A, that last sentence, just because I'm not sure what it means for removal or repair to not be less than 36 inches. I think we all know what that means, but I think the goal is that the clearance or the pathway, unimpeded pathway, be not less than 36 inches. So I think we could just say that and clean up that sentence. So it's just a little more clear. Also, just a little language thing on subparagraph B, 6th line down that starts resolution. This is the requirement that the city clerk put together a list of anybody that we have had to go and make these removals for so that we can collect on their taxes. And in that part of the sentence says the resolution containing a list of all lots and parcels of land in the city from the sidewalks adjacent to the fronting on which snow, et cetera, et cetera. That phrase from the just doesn't make sense to me, but I think the intent would be to say with. So, lots with sidewalks adjacent. So might just look at that if there's a way to clarify that language. On the much more important issue of the kind of the policy question that Councilman Kennedy brought up about whether the city should remove the snow that it puts on curb walks, that's a big deal, and so I would just encourage us to think through that very carefully. It is a huge problem for anybody who has a curb walk. We all know that. The original thinking was those lots would be more affordable because there'd be less land and the developer could sell them more affordably. And I think that's probably the case. That was one of the benefits. Those property owners don't have to maintain the boulevard, which is a continuing savings to them. Those are all the benefits. The cost side is exactly what we're talking about. So I don't know what the solution is. We could create maybe a snow removal district, I don't know, or plow to the center. But in order to, before you make any change on this, that would be a huge impact on how we plow streets and what the cost would be, since it could be dozens of miles, we would need to know how much are we talking about? How many miles of curb walks are there? What would be the cost? This is for, to do something different. I don't know what that would be, or remove that snow by the city. So I just would caution us to move carefully on that and get the data on that. And then the last one on the changing of the section 15-15 or 501 language. Of course, no problem with the concept here. I would just ask Laura if she hasn't, if she may be able to comment on this now, or if not, just do it later. But to look at those administrative rules to make sure that there is no place in there where the city is given the option to do A or B. I have no reason to think there is. What we're saying is the state's rules are our rules. Fine in concept, but what if the state's rules is that the city actually has to make a choice, or may do A or may do B, in which case we haven't made the choice of A or B. So we just need to make sure that it makes sense to say we are adopting all of those state rules, just to make sure they're clear if we're doing that wholesale. So those are my only comments. Back to council, and we will have an opportunity for public comment in just a minute.
Mayor, if I may
Yeah,
respond
please.
to some of your comments. As far as the administrative rules, I know that when legal submitted this language to me, they had indicated that not much had changed in the actual rules. So not a whole lot had changed, but we will certainly double check that again. My other question to you is, would everyone agree that the word width in that section, would that be sufficient for the clearance issue?
No one's disagreeing.
Okay.
Yes, so.
And so in my response to Councilmember Neese, and possibly all of you weren't copied on it, but I can forward it. There is an ordinance regarding tree canopy that's already in existence and is actually 11 feet over a sidewalk. So yeah, if you're up on a unicycle, you're good, So what was my last question to you? I forgot it now. So I guess I'm gonna just ask, would you prefer it if I removed subsection D for now? Until we can,
Speaking just for myself, I would hate to see us hold off on fixing 90% of the problems because of the 10% big problem. So yes, I'd like to at least personally like to see that as an option, not to say we don't address that, but I'd hate to prevent you from moving ahead, because I know you wanted to have things in place before the snow season starts. And I'm not sure we will be able to bite off that large of a piece of the elephant and get it well chewed before snow season starts. But that's my thought, council. What else do you think?
When you say agree, you're saying that you want to leave it in there. Yeah, I think leave it in there for now. We can address.
Oh, I see. Leave it in for now, but still continue to research whether that should be changed.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Other things for Tina before we have public comment on this issue? Councilor Good?
So, well, this isn't directly related to the proposed changes of the ordinances. So it is really important to have our sidewalks cleared, especially in places like near schools. And so in the past, I've seen near Billings Senior High School, some properties that just don't ever shovel their snow. And I've called them in a couple times, but what is the procedure? How does, once code enforcement's notified, what happens from there with the property?
So the ordinance reads that it needs to be removed within 24 hours after the accumulation stops. So we created door hangers. We do not send a letter on those because 10 days is not reasonable. It could be melted by then. This is Montana. So we do door hangers. They do open a case, so we have a record of if that person continually or that property continually doesn't. And that's how we enforce that. They go back and make sure that it's done.
Thank you.
Councilor Neese?
Tina, often I see sidewalks that aren't cleared, but then we get more snow on it, and of course snow's melted, and then so they may clear it, but then the sidewalk is it's pretty hard to pass on because maybe they've gotten it, but there's 2 inches of ice on it, stuff like that. So does this ordinance address any of that? Is it because it doesn't really say it has to clear down to the surface of the sidewalk? It just has to have 36 inches wide, and yet you could still have a pile of hard-packed snow or ice that you can maneuver on.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does include ice and slush, but I can certainly try to work some language with the assistance of Laura on that actual clearance down to the sidewalk,
Okay.
if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just makes sure, again, because we want to make sure it's travelable and the sidewalk. So, and to your point, Ed, again, I agree. I think we need to have more. I hope this is just a start to bring all of these different ordinances in one place so we can know what, when I'm going to be on a sidewalk and I can't travel, I don't have to go look at one ordinance over here to trying to find out why I have to report it over for a tree hanging over or something like that. So, thank you.
I'd comment and question. One comment on, I certainly appreciate Councilmember Neese's desire to have somebody be able to look here and see what all their responsibilities are. But sometimes it is helpful to have a requirement in 2 different places because you may have people that start in a different place. One way to address that would be not to rewrite the requirement, which creates real danger because all of a sudden, if you make an amendment in one place, you may not catch it in the other one, but instead just reference it. So to say in here, the height limitation, which is very important, shall also be respected, or you shall also comply with height requirements in article section, and then just reference it. That way they know there is such a thing. They can go to look at it and not get lost. Yep. My question is, if anybody knows, Laura, Gina is here. My vague recollection is that the city is under still a consent decree that it agreed to with the Federal Department of Justice back in the 1990s that impacts a lot of how we do the curb cuts and ramps. I may be off on that. That's before my day. But if that's true, do we know if that has any relevance to what we're talking about for sidewalks? And if nobody knows, maybe somebody should dig that out and just make sure it's not relevant. But that was my recollection, that there was at one point a consent decree out there, and we've been trying to comply with that ever since. Any comment or just, no, I see some shaking heads, so nobody's,
I
nobody
mean,
was around that long ago.
well, no, yeah, there was, I mean, I don't know if I was around that long or not, but I know there was, there is, and the city continues every year to upgrade the ramps that are out of, or the corners that are out of compliance. And and I don't, Debbie could tell you probably where we're at. It's a every single year project. I know we had Public Works and Debbie review this, but we can certainly double check in terms of if there was anything that regarding that, but they are continuing to do that to meet those requirements that you're talking about.
Great, and it might be very narrow and just deal with, those corner cuts or whatever. Okay, why don't we, Councilmember Russos?
Thank you, Mayor. I did have one more thing. So this only is dealing with sidewalks, right? Not multi-use paths that happen to be along somebody's frontage to a road?
Are you referring to like a walking path in a subdivision?
Exactly. Well, like the multi-use path along Grand or Central, especially on Central where it goes by a bunch of houses that kind of back up to Central.
Yeah, no, they are treated. Mhm. So down by Shiloh and King, where there's that walking area that's near the road, that one that's also something that would need to be cleared that we could enforce. This would apply to that,
Okay.
south of that intersection.
Right. So the people along Central that are like 36 to 38th across from the COT, they back up to that multi-use path. They are
Yes.
responsible for clearing that multi-use path, at least 36 inches wide,
The one along Central on the north side there?
south side.
On the south side, trying to picture it.
So
I would have
we've
to
got
look
these
at
all over the
that,
city.
because I
right?
know they are on the north side, because we do have them, now that we're in weed season, they are responsible for the boulevard. And
I
that sort
think
of-
people mostly have the expectation that they might have to clear their sidewalks, but these multi-use paths are generally, if they're in the city right away, I think the city has mostly been plowing those.
I would have to check with Public Works on
Yeah,
that, but
so
I
let's
will.
check on that. And then some places where we now have dedicated Met Transit stops, where sidewalks are. In some cases, those sidewalks have been enlarged to put a nice stop there, which is nice. Are people or businesses now responsible for clearing out the Met Transit stop, like if there's a shelter and that kind of stuff?
Good question. I would imagine Met Transit handles that, but I know that there are 5-foot curbs and that's what we discussed with Debbie. And when I originally had made some comments to her or requests from her, she reminded me that there were 5-footers, and that's why we narrowed it down to 36 inches, because even the city uses some of that portion. So I will check with Met Transit.
Last year
about
was
those
really
bus stops.
challenging. Some of those Met Transit stops got all plowed in and people couldn't even access them there. So I think just having an idea of whose responsibility those stops are would be good.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come back here to council in just a minute, but now let's see if there's any public comment on this item number 1. If there is, please come to the podium. We just ask that you tell us who you are and keep your comments to 3 minutes. You can see the little orange clock over there to keep track of time. Is there any public comment on item number 1? Any public comment on item number 1? Before I close the public comment period. No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Council, or Chris, go ahead.
I'd like some clarity on whether Section D is being changed and if it's staying or whether it's being taken out. Because I'd rather have that conversation tonight than during a Monday night council meeting when you're ready to approve it.
I think it should stay.
So is it going to have the language that Mr. Kennedy suggested?
No.
Okay.
No, I think before we do something like that, we need to have Debbie here to
I agree. There's
really
a
let us know
huge
what the financial impact is gonna be.
responsibility that comes with that. So I just want to make sure we're clear about what language is going or not going.
I think what the mayor talked about when he said, well, how many curb walks are there in the city versus boulevards? And I mean, it sure could be a way to do assessments based upon, the type of curb walk you have, because it's going to be more expensive to clear the snow on the curb walks versus the boulevard walks. And so if they want their residential streets cleared and they have to send 2 trucks out there, one to clear the snow and then one to clear the sidewalk, then that's the cost that has to be passed on to the homeowner.
I disagree. I will vote against this ordinance when it comes back if it's not changed, because there are so many folks that have had to go out, re-clean off their sidewalks and everything, because a lot of it, I got to tell you, a lot of the times it's not a problem. And then you get someone new or someone careless or whatever and plows it all in. And then I will tell you, I get an awful lot of calls, and I can send those to the city administrator, every one of them that I get. But I think the city has a responsibility too. So if you're going to make it that if the sidewalk is cleared and the city is not responsible for putting snow back on it, then it's not worth it. I'd take it all out.
So I think for now, as is, but obviously an important thing to be discussed. And we haven't really discussed if there's any other options besides what we're doing now in any depth. So one possibility might be that we do what we're doing for the most part, but we create an option where somebody can call and ask for their sidewalk to be, the snow to be removed at a price. And maybe we give them a good deal, but we do that with solid waste, for example. If you want an extra can, you pay for your extra can. And maybe something like that could even be done at the public works level. And that would be maybe 5% of curb walks instead of 100% of curb walks, just as a possibility.
But Mayor, you're missing it. They've already cleaned it themselves. And when the city clears off the road, they put it back on their sidewalk. We have in this ordinance that you can't put your snow from the sidewalk into the street, but we don't say anything about the city putting it back on their sidewalk. And that's where the rub really comes. So I wish you come up with some type of answer to that, but it's just, if it's going to be punitive for the homeowner because their sidewalk is filled, and most of the time when it happens, it's when it's slushy and then it gets put on their sidewalk and they can't get it off. And that's, and then they're responsible for the liability and they're responsible to clear it off. And there's a lot of people that it's a pain. So if it's going to be punitive and people are going to get fined for it or whatever, then the city needs to take some responsibility then too. Now, if there's no problem with it, that if they've cleaned it off and the city comes on and puts the snow or the ice or whatever back on their sidewalk, it may be a week before they get that all off. But they don't want to be written up because they didn't clear it off and someone reports them. So that's where I have a rub on this whole thing. Because what happens is when they come plowing at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm out there at 5, then it's put on. And I have to tell you, I was snow blowing one morning and a police officer turned around, came back, and she told me I cannot blow my snow out in the street. And then within 2 hours, the grader came down and put the snow back on my sidewalk. So it's not just me. There's a lot of people, but I can give you my own personal stuff over the years. If it's going to be punitive and there's a fine or anything on it and someone can report you on it, then someone needs to clear it off. And it's not the folks that didn't put it on there. So that's all I'm asking for. It's a fairness.
Mayor, there
No,
could be another
absolutely. I'm sorry, Councilmember Neese. I just, yeah, perhaps the thing to do right now is to delete D until more research, and I can always bring something back to you.
Councilmember Kenny or Councilmember Rogers?
I would feel like this is not an ordinance issue. It's a public works issue, and that has to be addressed. I mean, that's not really your responsibility to go around saying what the city has to do. That's a much bigger fish to fry. So that would be something I think we need to approach through public works instead of putting that on your.
Yeah, Mayor, the other option is on site, in curb walks, residentials, is they just don't plow to the curb. And so they just plow it in, 3 feet off of the curb, and that's where it goes. That is another option that they could do. It makes it so they can't park on the streets very well. But that's what, if they want their residential streets plowed, the only way to do it because of curb walks is to put it up on the curb, which it lays over into the sidewalk, and it has to be cleared. And so those that have, like you say, boulevard walks, it has no issue. Now on the collectors, going down Broadwater or Grand, there is no room. Those collectors, or not collectors, the arterials, you have to plow to the curb. And maybe there is something that maybe at those, the city needs to go back and then, clear a path 36 inches wide on those to maintain those areas, because you can't just leave a plow to lane, or a lot of times they're doing the center on those anyway. And so that really kind of takes that issue off the table. So, and maybe that's what they have to do on the residential, start going to the center too. But again, that's going to be more expensive, which that just leads to more taxes that people have to pay. So even the people with the boulevard walks are going to pay for those with the curb walks because of the way they develop their property.
On your ultimate question, keep or remove D, personally, I don't care. I don't think we should adopt this until we've wrestled with the question that Councilmember Kennedy has raised, and which we've all experienced every winter. So either keep it in but continue the discussion, or remove it, bring it back for discussion. I don't know. I don't particularly care, but I agree we're probably not ready to adopt this without more of a discussion.
Right. The last thing I want to do is create more work for Public Works or more cost to residents. So I think with the council's permission, I'm just going to remove section D for now. Many of the things that I need to function for this coming snow season are addressed in subs A, B, and C. So that's a really healthy start for us. So maybe what I'll do is remove section D and do some more research with Public Works, or maybe some other options on how we can address this issue, if that's okay with all of you.
But don't tell MDT that we're deleting section D.
Okay, very good. If there's nothing else from council, we'll move on to our next item. I don't see anything else from council.
Before we do, I have one question I know Wyeth wants me to ask. So are you comfortable with me bringing this with the changes that you've recommended and what we've discussed to a first reading and public hearing? Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our second item was our public arts policy. So we'll have a little bit of a changing of the guard up here. And do we just hand this over to Elise, or Wyeth? Do you have another intro before that?
I think, no, Mayor, I think, yeah, Elise can go right into this. This is, as is clear from the memo and the information, a follow-up from a previous work session. And the focus tonight is just on those changes that we've made based on that discussion at the last session. So I'll let her walk through that and then go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let's see. I think I did it. There we go. Okay. Thanks for having me back today. I hope I kept my presentation pretty short and to the point. I didn't want to necessarily rehash everything we talked about last time, but I wanted to address the major changes that came out of this. We've certainly made other minor changes that have been incorporated. The mayor sent along a lot of edits, things like that. But I just wanted to hit the major points today for this updated public art policy. So one of the major changes in the workflow for public art would be that we are recommending, as was brought up last time, since the Public Art Committee is an advisory committee and wouldn't be able to approve, we're recommending that if the cost of the materials plus installation was less than $25,000, that the city administrator would approve that. And then if the cost was more than $25,000, then it would go to council for a review and approval. I'm happy to walk through this workflow again, but that was the major change there. So unless anybody wants to rehear that, I'm gonna move on to the next slide. Okay, so these were kind of the major updates. Like I said, there are many more in there, but these were the major ones I wanted to hit. We talked about the city administrator would approve anything that would be supplies and installation costs of less than $25,000. It would come to council for anything above or equal to $25,000. I know Gina pointed out city administrator has very continual discussions with you, so I'm sure if anything came up that he could bring that up to you all as well. There was a question on like the maintenance budget on that 10% and how that would be calculated. We had some more discussions and we landed on calculating that on the materials plus installation costs. The thought being that if you have a very famous artist, for instance, Ben Pease, who's a very well-known artist, has had work like at the Field Museum, he's going to charge a lot more for his time than would somebody who's less well-known nationally. But it would still cost us about the same amount of money to maintain those pieces if he's doing a mural that's 20 by 20 and a local artist or less well-known artist does a 20 by 20 mural, we're going to have the same maintenance costs there. So that was an attempt to kind of standardize those things. It also got kind of complicated when we started talking about, well, what if we have volunteer hours? What about all these other things? We felt like this simplified it. Additionally, we talked about setting up another fund, and our partners at Healthy by Design have agreed to help with this. That could help fund maintenance that would exceed that 10%. I think up to this point, there hasn't been necessarily a lot of maintenance on public art that's been needed. And we could kind of have a trial period potentially where we saw how much we dipped into those other funds, if at all, and then adjust if needed. I just did want to point out, since this also would cover commercial garbage containers, we wouldn't be collecting in any maintenance fund on that. If something happened to their wrap on a commercial garbage container, in my mind, that's up to the property owner, that they just have to redo the whole thing. So, because that's about maintaining their property in good repair. The deaccessioning, we changed it so that the city or the Public Arts Committee would recommend deaccessioning and it would be approved by the city administrator. We did add in a condition that it could be requested by the majority vote of council, which was one thing that I know was brought up last time. So those were kind of my high-level edits. Happy to talk about anything else. Or Gina, I don't know if you want to say anything. Wyeth? No. Okay, thanks.
Questions? We started here. Why don't we start here and go this way? Councilmember Gillick?
So I wasn't here for the very healthy dialogue it sounds like we had back in July 7th. So it sounds like some really good topics were brought up, maintenance as well as the approval process. I guess I don't have anything other than to say that it'd probably be a lot easier to, if Barnett Newman or a Mark Rothko were vandalized, it'll be a lot easier to take care of than a Hieronymus Bosch or a Michelangelo or something like that. We're very detailed, so it's hard to know kind of on those kinds of things. But I think what we've seen, I'm glad you look historically, what kind of issues have come up. That seems to be probably the best gauge. So no questions.
Okay. Councilmember Rowan, Councilmember Denise.
Yeah, I had a couple of things on section 15. Let me get back up to it here. Talks about the city enter into a written agreement with the applicant to memorialize the terms of the display of public art. And then it goes on to say at the very end of that, it says, in any case, if the agreement is inconsistent with the terms of this policy, the agreement shall prevail. Now that's really concerning. I think anytime the agreement doesn't follow policy, council should be involved and approve those terms of the agreement that are contrary to policy. So I would suggest that you add on the end of that sentence, with council approval. So, for instance, the agreement could say that no one has the right to, decommission this art. And so suddenly now that agreement overrides our policy, and now council can't decommission the art if they ever wanted to. And so I think we need to, when we are overriding policy, then we need to look at it. That goes on to also, in relation to that, with section 19, absent other contractual agreements, and then I kind of put in there with council approval, public art may be decommissioned by the city. So again, as long as the council is approving, terms that are contrary to the policy. That makes sense?
Sure, yeah.
It does. You mind if I comment?
I was
Because
gonna
I
ask you to.
raised this issue. It'd be, there's 2 points in time. This was intended to address the situation where you already have an agreement, and there's a ambiguity or some question about what that agreement means. And if you're the artist or the organization that's paid for the artwork, you don't want the city to say, well, I don't care what the agreement says, that the city signed on the bottom line, because it violates my interpretation of our policy. You should have caught that at the time you signed the agreement and made sure the agreement was clear. And so it's trying to create a default, which one prevails. And in this case, the agreement. Now, if we want to say that the city council has to approve every such agreement, fine, and we'd have an opportunity to compare against our policy and say we don't like that. But it is trying to give some flexibility that if the city and the artist want to depart from the language of the policy, they can do that. But we could put some sideboards on that.
Yeah,
it's trying to address that situation where there's an ambiguity after the agreement already exists.
I think if there's an ambiguity afterwards, which I don't disagree, that would be something that the policy, the agreement, they didn't catch it at the time of the agreement, and now there's ambiguity about it. I think at that time, maybe the council needs to then look at that and determine that and say, no, the policy applies in this case, or no, the agreement applies in this case. So I think to just say the agreement applies, again, there's still going to be the ambiguity of someone thinks the policy applies, someone thinks the agreement applies. But until the body that's the authority says yay or nay, it's still always going to be, a disagreement on that. And so if there is ambiguity after the fact, maybe it just needs to come back to the council.
Yeah, I'd be concerned if I'm on the other end of that agreement and the agreement basically says heads I win, tails you lose, because ultimately it is whatever the council wants. That's not much of a contract. So that would be the concern.
Well, I think it's only in those cases where, like you say, it's not clear in the agreement versus what the agreement says and the policy says.
I would say before we did that, we just get rid of it, and then we just let the courts decide what the agreement means.
Yeah, you could do that, and then that's going to be expensive. But I guess you're right. That would take the council out of that. But again, the whole council's art policy is, and again, the council's going to change over time, and it'll be up to that council then to determine, is this appropriate for the city or not, based upon the agreement of the terms, and is this agreement really match the policy or not? That's my, but I agree, if you want to take it out, I'm okay with that too, because then we just have to make sure, but again, I believe that, and that's in the case of, you missed it, but I think if the staff is working a deal with the artist, and it clearly states a violation of what the policy is, the council should then have to agree to overriding policy on that issue.
And I wouldn't disagree with that. They should approve that agreement. And again, that's different in time than when the agreement has already been signed, which is the,
Yeah.
So, okay, and you can talk with Gene about how you want to address it. Not a
Thank you.
hill
And I
to
think
die,
what that does is that takes away, unfortunately, takes away the $25,000 limit. So if the agreement is, $10,000 and it's a completely contrary to something in the policy, then it has to come to council for that approval.
I guess, if I might, I'm a little confused by you guys. So if the agreement, if we're reviewing and going through the process with the agreement, I guess I'm not quite sure how we're gonna know it's not, if we've measured it against the policy and it's consistent, then how are we gonna know that it's not consistent? Because that sounds like what you're saying, and I guess I don't get how that would happen.
I think it's the
How would
cases
we-
where you have an agreement and the artist wants to do something we really want, or our committee really wants it, and it's different from the agreement, then in that case, or I'm sorry, different from what the council policy states, then that needs to be brought to council. And the good thing on that is if we find that we're having to see that all the time, then maybe we need to change policy, because this is maybe something that artists consistently want to do, and our policy is too rigid, and we need to loosen it up. And so I think it just helps us to make sure we hone the policy right. At the same time, I think any policy out there, when your city administrator, you have the policies out there, when your city administrator follows a policy and suddenly has to be an exception, unless there's already an authority in there to override that policy, comes to the council and says, this is what we're doing. And so I think it's going to be the same thing in this. It's just over time, it's going to hopefully make that our policy a little more clear and change it.
Okay, so it wouldn't come here unless there was this inconsistency, is what you're saying.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
Thank you. And Councilmember Neese, we also, I'm pretty sure you remember, we have in there that the Public Art Committee would come to the council once a year and recommend any changes, as we experience anything that might need to be changed. So I think that's definitely expected.
Okay. This way, Councilor Boyer?
So is this one working? Are we talking about one or two things a year, or is this 100 a year? I mean, are we making more of a mountain out of a molehill here? I mean, how many art projects do you anticipate seeing in our lifetime?
Thank you, Councilmember. A lifetime. That's a good question. I don't think we anticipate being necessarily overrun with these. And maybe if Melissa Henderson would like to comment, she's on the Parks board, and right now they're reviewing public art. Well, and Councilmember Repsis used to be on the Parks board. They're currently reviewing art in the parks. I would say there's maybe 5 a year.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
And Melissa, if you would just again introduce yourself and your role in the existing art.
Sure. I was trying to avoid the front table. Melissa Henderson. I'm a director at the Public Health Department here, and I've co-managed the grant with Elise for the duration. Yeah, I think honestly it's going to be half a dozen a year. We have a lot more than that happening in our community, but in terms of public space, my guess would be about a half a dozen. The Healthy by Design Coalition's been mapping public art in an attempt to really lay the foundation for what does it look like in our community. And in seeing the data that's coming in, it is about a half a dozen.
Thank you. And I just also like to say this, by having this policy, we talked about this last time, but for instance, the eBird wanted to paint a mural on the 21st Street underpass. That took a lot of Wyeth and Debbie's time trying to figure out like how would that get approved, who would review it. And so by having this policy, we can handle it kind of at a lower staff level. It'll obviously come to Chris for approval, but it's kind of just more organized and we know what we're doing rather than trying to process every time.
Okay.
And that mural still hasn't been able to be done, so.
Council members Kennedy, Rogers, Tiswell, nothing for me. So
Thank you.
let's open it up for public comment. So this is an opportunity for anybody who would like to comment on item number 2, our public arts policy, to come to the podium and give us your thoughts. We just ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. You can keep your eye on the little pumpkin over there to keep track of time.
Mayor and Council, thank you. Mayor and Council, I really do hope that you see the value of having this policy. Without a policy, I was going to call it Renegade Art, and then I looked it up, and there's actually a gallery called Renegade Art. So that's copyrighted, I'm sure. You'll still have art, but you won't have the ability to really look at it and vet it. And this is a very important process for vetting. I was just reading, I get to do summer reading, and I'm reading the book, The World of Yesterday by Stefan Zweig. And he talks about the city he loved the most, Vienna. And he talks about what Vienna meant, what it looked like, what it sounded like, and how much he loved Vienna. And then it all changed. And that changed in 1938. And it's really a book of grieving for what is lost. And I believe that sometimes we underestimate the value of art. We underestimate the value of what it means to a city to embrace art, to be known for art, to be admired for its art. And his book is that grieving for the Vienna that didn't exist anymore and has never existed since. So I would say to us as a community that we value the artists that we have in our community. They have something important to contribute to our community. They have something important to say to who we are and what we want to be. And this policy is just the nuts and bolts of how we embrace that and how we come to see our city in its own unique way for the value of art and for culture. And I do ask for a due pass. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item number 2? Any other public comment on this item number 2? Before we close the public comment period. No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Council, is there anything else? My inclination or my suspicion is next time you're going to see this is going to be on a regular consent agenda or regular agenda. If there's nothing else significant. Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. There's one other section 22 that I looked at. It states, when it talks about when there's damage on the artwork, it states that the city staff agree to contact the artist. Now, I think that's great, but I think it should be attempt to contact the artist, because we have no idea if the artist moved out of town. Then we're going to have this artwork that's damaged, and because we say we agree to contact them, we can't do anything until we contact them. So I would say some kind of notification. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get that added.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else on item number 2? Okay. Very good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Huge progress on this. We'll have the best public art policy in the state of Montana. Maybe the only one, but certainly the most detailed, well thought out. Yeah. Okay. Chris, anything in the way of upcoming agenda items that you wanted to call our attention to?
Yeah, real briefly. So you saw in the weekly that the Sabura expansion kind of timelines and things is laid out over the next essentially 90 days. Wyeth and I will be at the South Billings Task Force later this week, just kind of outlining and answering questions on process. wholesale rates for 2026. So going back to the conversation relative to the refineries and Lockwood. So we've got that issue resolved, and we'll have those rates in front of you a week from tonight as part of the overall budget adoption. It is 1 year because we are collecting some data that'll set us up for 2027 and beyond. So that's on your agenda a week from tonight, as well as all the various components of the final adoption of the budget. So heads up over the next 90 days, Sabura, next week, a couple of big items with wholesale rates and with budget adoption. So that's all I have, Mayor and Council.
Chris, if you don't mind, that Sabura map I looked at, I didn't have a chance to look at it real close, but it looks like it's just about the entire south side now.
It is. Yep, it essentially is everything, which we deliberately, the first kind of triangle area was close enough that frankly, the decision was, well, let's go fully out. You can always shrink it ultimately in the process. That's easier than saying, well, why didn't we just add this one more area or this one more area? So you are right. When you kind of take the location of the tracks interstate where the district already is, it pretty much does. It's pretty easy to define geographically in the community.
Because I thought we were pretty much just going to extend it to get South Park Pool, and then that was it.
No, I think there was real clarity that the economic viability and improvements and investments along 27th and State Street, and that there are several corridors of business activity in addition to South Park.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Then council discussion, Councilor McKinney?
I have a couple of things. Chris is going to be speaking at the Southside Task Force on Thursday night and talking about the expansion of Sabura. So I invite you all if you'd like to come. It's at 2520 Fifth Avenue South at the Walla Walla Auditorium, right there at the Family Tree Center. So at 6 o'clock. So if you'd like to come, Chris will be talking about that. Chris, I have a couple of things. One is, as you're hiring directors, I would just ask, or I'll come back with an initiative. I would ask that the directors that we hire live in the city of Billings. And it's come back to me a couple of times when they don't live in the city of Billings, but their department has fees or paying taxes or whatever. It's better that they live in the city as they're offering services to people. So I would ask that, or we can do it.
Before you get off that topic, Chris, we've talked about that in the past, I thought before, where we wanted to have directors, but you had directors that were out of the city. And so the question was, can you have some require in and some not? So what was the status on it? Because I agree with Councilmember Kenny. I would like to see that, but.
I think that's a pretty substantial challenge. I have successfully transitioned an organization where most all the directors did live inside the city limits. That was with an incentive. And for the most part, over my 13 years, I'd hired every director. And so we had an incentive, which if you moved within the city limits, you could start getting what otherwise the city was contributing towards their retirement in addition to the state retirement. They could start getting that day one as a housing allowance because housing costs were very high too. That incentive program ended up with inside of maybe 7 years where almost everybody was living in, but there was not a city rule or law that said outside of the city administrator or city manager that they have to live in the city. To also say, what do you do with you have directors who are in and administration? I mean, I'd live in, charter requires that. Who don't? Are you going to give a timeline? I mean, it's a big deal. That is a substantial.
I really do think it's very tough to say that you make a recommendation in the city of Billings for assessments for road maintenance, and when you're not living in the city of Billings, it doesn't affect you at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, if we just don't automatically do it, then I would come back with a council initiative to do it, because you're hiring 2 more city directors coming up, and I would hope that they would live in the city of Billings. The, every council person and the council people get paid such big wages, have to live in a certain area and respond to issues in their area. I really do feel that if we're responding to issues in the city and you are a director, I'm not saying all employees, I'm just saying directors, I really do feel that they need to live it within the city.
I would just say this, I think it will require an initiative, because for me to
Okay.
create a rule like that and enforce that, and then, so I would ask you, as you're contemplating doing that, I would ask the council to give that very serious consideration on both sides, because that is a substantial, I understand the arguments. I've lived in every city I've worked for. So I understand it completely, but I have never worked anywhere where the directors were required to, and it will have a significant effect on our ability to recruit and retain people in that role. That doesn't take away from what you're saying. I just ask that you consider that if you ultimately decide to look into that initiative, as we're trying to recruit department heads to come in, as well as trying to retain the department heads that we have.
It would be kind of foolish to hire a chief of police that lives in the county and not in the city, as you talk about the crime rate and things like that. So I'll bring it back as an initiative. The other thing that I would like an update on is, as we've had discussions on the landfill, on public works, on public utilities, we've had retirements in these areas. You have gone to a consultant and looked at how are we going to run all these departments. Can you brief us in a couple weeks at our next meeting and let us know where you're going with that?
So, Councilmember Kennedy, I believe what you're referring to is the analysis of the solid waste division and the landfill. Happy to. I have not seen that document. It doesn't exist yet. So, be
I would
happy
just like to be in the loop on that, and I think each of the council people would too. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Brett?
So, I mean, since Gina's here, Gina, can we legally require directors to live in the city? Is that something that Constitution, whatever? I mean, is there can we do that legally?
Yes, I think you can do that.
I don't think we want to get in the discussion. It's not on our agenda too deep, but there's a lot of fine details there, and there'd be one important question would be to whom does it apply? Chris kind of referenced that. To existing department heads? No, that would be crazy. What about an employee who's been with the city for 20 years and kids are in a certain school, they're as invested in their home as they're ever going to be, and they would make a great department head? Sorry, you can't do that with that. Or does it only apply to brand new hires to the city? There's really no grandfathering that. So anyway, lots of questions that have to be asked. Okay, any other items of council discussion? Councilmember One?
Thank you, Mayor. I had this conversation with the city administrator, and I just want to share my concerns with others. I'm very disappointed that we aren't having a conversation at the mental health facility tonight. I understand the state's not available. I don't know, Mayor, if you or the city administrator have had any further conversations and might have any additional information to share. I'd love to hear it if you have. But I have said for a long time, probably to everyone's fatigue, that I don't believe we're following the ordinance on agendas. And the response has been, well, it's in the city administrator's weekly. The mental health facility was in the city administrator's weekly as something that should have been on the agenda tonight. I understand the state can't be here, but I don't think that was a reason to remove it from the agenda. We're all hearing from our constituents. I think these chambers should be open to our constituents. Of course, we have public comment period, but I think we should let people know that they can come here and share their concerns. We're certainly all getting the emails, but this is a significant, you heard the commissioner tonight, this is a significant issue in front of the community. I was really disappointed to see it come off the agenda tonight, and I really hope that we will consider not just in continuing to invite the state and encourage the state to come down here and have this conversation with us, but consider some community meetings. I think we'll all talk to our task forces about them, but this is a significant conversation for the community to have. And I think we should go above and beyond in encouraging the public to be a part of the conversation. So I don't know if either of you know anything new. I'd love to hear it if you do. But I think this is not something that is a one-time conversation in this chamber or in the community.
I don't have any real information to add on that, only that I guess it was my assumption that assumed the presence of somebody from the state, and that hadn't happened, or there was no indication that it was going to happen. So I was surprised that it wasn't on our agenda for tonight. But beyond that, I don't have a lot to offer.
I don't have any additional information from our conversation Friday morning. I would, so in that, since it was a one-on-one conversation, what was communicated to me by Mr. Vila, whose role is not that of the department or running the facility, but apparently find a location and get it built, is that he did not believe in the month of August he would have any new information to share, but that they were having conversations in Helena and on the second floor of the Capitol building. I thought your email to Senator Yakowicz asked the same kind of questions that anybody and everybody should be interested in. And my encouragement to Mr. Vila was to work with Senator Yakowicz and others, because anybody anywhere is going to want to know that information. And that's what I would ask us not before, maybe the timing is not the question. How do we have a informed conversation about the impact of a facility like this, rather than coming to conclusions? Because I haven't heard much of anything from the state of Montana as to the details that would lead us to conclude that either this would be helpful to the system or harmful to the system and or our community.
Chris, is there any way, excuse me, Mayor, is there any way for our GIS or someone to produce some kind of map that might show us as council members state trust land, undeveloped city land, undeveloped county land? Like, I know that sort of land price is a critical decision for the state. Is there any chance that we could get a map that we could just look at and see options that are out there? I'm sure I could do it myself, but I'm not that good at GIS work.
I'd be happy to talk to Jeff and GIS about what, and I'd ask them to keep it iterative. Don't try to get to what you think is the perfect map.
Correct.
But
yeah, just give us a county snapshot. Thank
Sure.
you. I would appreciate that.
Very good, thank you. Anything else? We're going to final opportunity for public comment on items not on our agenda tonight. Is there any public comment on anything that was not on our agenda tonight? Before we close the public comment period and adjourn the meeting. Seeing no one coming to the podium, we'll close the time for public comment, and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.